Somebody who sells a boat or a ship. Machas attorney sells the mast, vesanes. The nace is the sail. Vesachukin, the anchors, veskomanigim on all the oars. Avalom he doesn't sell the galley slaves, nor martufin, nor the containers which hold the cargo, the velos antiki, nor the cargo itself. We said it and everything within it, they're all sold. If you sell a carriage, you don't sell the mules which lead the carriage. If you sell the mules, you don't sell the carriage. If you sell the yoke which holds two cows in place when they're leading something, you don't sell the cows or the oxen, whatever they are. If you sell the oxen, you don't automatically sell the yoke. The reader's famous shita is, see how much you paid, that'll tell you. Kate's at house, armor low, we said, sell me your yoke for 200 zuz. Everybody knows you don't sell yokes for 200 zuz. They don't cost that much money. Say we never follow the price. Why? Because prices fluctuate depending on location, time, and need. Right? So therefore, you cannot tell by price. If you sell a donkey you have not sold the what's the word for it? What's the good word? Accessories. That's what I'm looking for. Now, the Pnei Moshe says the stuff which is made for riding that you did buy. In other words, the saddle and such like. I don't know if they use saddles from donkeys, but whatever they use, that's sold. The question is the accessories which are used to carry cargo, whether that's sold or not, and kind of comma holds, you didn't sell it. The accessories are included. Depends. Sometimes they're sold, sometimes they're not sold. How so? If the donkey was in front of him, Caleb allowed, and the accessories are on it. He said, and he pointed at the donkey. So obviously that means the donkey with everything which is on it. Caleb then includes the Caleb. He said, that donkey, in other words, wasn't pointing at it, wasn't present, and he did the accessories were not apparent, obviously, before them when they're making the deal. And then the accessories are not sold. He sells the donkey, now this is talking about he sells a nursing donkey. Okay, that's the Pnei Moshe says it. Somebody says, sell me a nursing donkey. So you don't sell nursing donkeys for the purpose of the milk, because obviously the milk is treif, right? So therefore, if you're selling a nursing donkey, you're selling obviously, or buy a nursing donkey, it's in order to buy the young donkeyette, or donkey, whatever they're called, together with the donkey. Okay, that's called a saich. So Macha says saich. It's all together with the mother. Macha par, however, if you sell a milk cow, it doesn't necessarily include the calf, because you might well be buying for the milk. So therefore, if you want to buy the calf, you have to specify that separately. Macha ashbos, if a person is selling garbages, then Macha zivla, he's selling the contents thereof. Obviously, this becomes what we're talking about specifically a fertilizer, right? Because obviously people don't buy the dumps in order without getting the fertilizer. That's the point of it. Machar bar, if you sell a well, machar meimav includes the water. Machar shrevel, you could sell dovkat. Machar yanim includes the pigeons. Machar kaveres, if you sell a honey, what's it called? A hive, right? Beehive. Machar dvorim, you sell the bees. No, kaveres. Second parak. Yeah. Okay, then. Kaveres is a sugya in Shabbos, but not here. Oh, Kaveres? I don't think so, but it could be you're right. Could be I'm wrong. Anyway, maybe you're right. Kaidal actually is one of the second parak I'm getting mixed up, but I don't know. Kaveres, I think, is in Shabbos. Anyway, you sell the bees. Certainly not the Yerushalmi. If you only bought, however, the fruit of the dovecot, meaning the doves, mafriach brecha rishona. You cause to fly away the first set of the first set of the birds. In other words, I guess it's first pair, I would say, in order that they should remain, in order to be fruitful, multiply, and make the next brood of birds for the owner of the dovecot. The rest of it he gets. Okay, so Breach Rishona, they fly away, meaning they fly back into the dovecot, and he takes all the ones which come after that, all the subsequent birds. Kaveres, I guess this is Bistam. Obviously, this is the assumption, when you sell a dovecot, you don't clean out the dovecot. You just buy everything besides what he needs in order to breed again. Similarly, Kaveres, if you buy the contents of the hive, you take the first three swarms which come out of the beehive; those are the best, and then misaris. Then from there on in, you alternate swarms. Misaris means take turns. You take one swarm, he takes one swarm. You take one swarm, he takes one swarm, in order that he should be left with some bees to repopulate his hive. Again, you buy the whole hive, you just bought the contents hive, and that's what it's assumed to include. Chalos vash, if you bought the honeycombs out of the hive, meniach shtari chalos, you leave two loaves. I don't know exactly how to measure the loaves, but that's for the bees which are left. Zesim lakutz, if you buy olive trees to chop down, meniach shtei grupios, you leave two fistfuls of stump next to the ground. Somehow that's enough for the olive trees to regrow. Okay, there are other interpretations of that, but we'll stick with that one. All right. Tani, we learned. If you sold the boat, you sell the ramp, and the water reservoir, which is in, of course, the seagoing vessel, has water well within it to take along fresh water. We don't know exactly what Yitzuin is. As Lieberman points out, Yitzuin means various different things throughout the Masechta. It's some sort of a house or a box with which people dwell, but obviously it's not integrally part of the boat. I guess it's probably like a box. It's not integrally connected, obviously. So I guess it's like, like a hut in which the people sleep when they're on the boat, but it can be removed from the boat afterwards, because obviously it's not sold with the boat, so it must be not integrally part of the boat. Ubin, and you didn't sell the ubin, I don't know exactly what it is, but some other thing which is part of the boat. By scupa, some threshold, and also is obviously removable. Vabitzis, and you didn't sell the bitzis. The bitzis is a small launch, little boat, which you used to get from the big boat to shore. Sumusamar Machar Dugis, you did sell the Dugis. Dugis and bitzis are the same thing. The Bavli gives the etymological derivations of these words. They had different, they meant the same thing, but used differently in different places. Okay. To Noam Shita Yoshua, I'm not sure exactly where this comes down in the sugya. Maybe it comes clear later on, I forget. But anyway, to Noam Shita Yoshua. Yoshua made 4 conditions when the Jews entered the land of Israel. What the 4 were of course a subject of controversy. But there are 4. Rabbi Levi ben Biri b'shem Rabbi Shimon Levi said the Arba. These are the following 4. Tap Tezayim Raf. Blakti Masovim M'chomakom. You gather grasses anywhere. Okay, now this is from your friend's field. You can go into your friend's field and gather grasses. It's not considered to be theft. Chutz b'sada tilson, except for the grasses which go in a fenugreek field. Why? Because those grasses he wants. Shasuyim shum grasses, you can't take those grasses. Okay, obviously they didn't have a concept in the old days of grasses which grow for beauty, right? They don't have yards with grasses. They didn't live in suburbia. But, what? nor for pasture, right? Because you weren't allowed to pasture your animals in the yeshuv, I guess, right? So, chutzi sod and tilsod, except for that which the grass which grow in the fenugreek field, shasum b'shem gas, you're not allowed to take them; it's theft. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Tamatina, lot of them sechta kilayim tilsod v'chein tilsod shehela mini asovim. If in the fenugreek field, fenugreek is a type of herb. If other grasses grow there, you're not required to hold them out. Now, the issue, of course, there is kilayim, right? If other grasses go with the fenugreek, so it's kilayim. There's not enough separation. So we don't make you hold them out. Kini masdisin, what it means by don't have to hold them out, right? You don't have to uproot them. Why don't you have to uproot them? Because anyway, in other words, you don't have to go immediately and uproot them, because anyway, as the Pnei Moshe explains, eventually you're going to get rid of them. It's not noach for you, because this grass is bad for the fenugreek. You know, kilayim is only kilayim if you are misratzeh, if you are happy with what's growing there. And since people don't like grasses growing in their fenugreek, so therefore it's not kilayim. You don't have to get rid of it right away. Eventually you're going to get rid of it anyway. So of course this is a direct contradiction to what we just said a moment ago. We said a moment ago, people like the grass growing in their fenugreek, and therefore you're not allowed to steal them, right? But here it's saying people don't like the grass growing in their fenugreek, so therefore it's not an issue of kilayim. So that's a contradiction, which isn't. People like the grass growing in their fenugreek because they don't like the grass growing in their fenugreek, right? So it says the Gemara, Kitnai shows Yoshua liked the condition which Yoshua stipulated. Atmar, you said, Malakti Masami Kom Mokom, Chutz Misadet Ilsun Shasuri Mishum Gazel. You said you can gather grass everywhere except for the fenugreek field, where it's also because of theft. This means that, and yet the other price that we just learned, right, one about kilayim, tells us that you don't want them. So which one is it? Is it theft, because you do want them, or is it kilayim, not kilayim, because you don't want them? So they said an answer like this: Tamon mishazora la'amir. Depends what the purpose is. And that'll answer the question as well. A person wants them because of amir. What is amir? Amir, according to the Pnei Moshe, means that you want them in order to make ropes out of them. In other words, in order to make bundles, the grass which grow in the fenugreek fields are particularly good in order to make bundles. Now, you don't want them for food purposes, that means. You want them rather for rope purposes. There's another shot here. Somebody brings down. I don't know if I wrote it. Gilin Ephraim says below that you want them in order to eat them, which is a little bit difficult. But again, I'm not sure exactly how that will answer the question. But he does say that that's what Amir means. But here, let's learn the Pnei Moshe. The Pnei Moshe says that Taman Mishazarn Lamir Bram Hocha Shazarn Lazera. If there are two types of, there are two reasons why you want grasses to grow. One reason why you want grasses to grow is for the potential to use them as ropes. The other is for the purpose of using them as seed. Now, the grass growing in the fenugreek field, you don't want it for seed. It's no good for seed. It's bad for the fenugreek. In itself is no good. So therefore, you don't want it to be miskayim, except for one purpose. What you want it to do is to use that as ropes, which is not as an edible purpose. For that purpose, as far as you're concerned, let somebody come and pluck them out of the ground, but let him leave them there. Because if he leaves them there, you can still use them for ropes. I guess according to Gilin Ephraim, you use them for some sort of fodder. Amir, I think, is animal fodder, not human consumption. So in any event, be that as it may, this is how we reconcile the contradiction. That nobody wants the fenugreek to stay, the grasses to stay in the ground to get the fenugreek. That's bad. Nobody wants them to grow there until they reach seed level, right? That they can use for seed because they're no good for seed. What you do want them to do is to pluck them out, but leave them in the field. Because if you pluck them up and leave them in the field, then you can use them in order to tie bundles of fenugreek to bring the fenugreek back to your house. So therefore, there's this kind of dichotomy. You want them, but you want them cut. So that's why there's no issue of kilayim, because you don't want them to grow, you want them cut out. Okay, it's a little bit straight, but I don't make up the Gemara, so I just say them over. That's what it says here. Ma'isna Yehoshua, so says the Gemara, so what was Yehoshua's stipulation? Lo'ev Raveira? Was there Yehoshua's stipulation that you can't steal it for the people who want it actually to grow? The Gemara is still explaining the answer. It says, Rabbi Yosef says, no, you don't want them to grow, you want them plucked, but you want them plucked and remaining in the field. So Yehoshua's takana not to pluck them out does not make it a kilayim issue, because you really don't want them to grow. Yeshua's takana was, if you want to pluck them out and leave them there, but don't pluck them out and take them away. Okay?
This is part of the answer.
What?
This Ma'isna Yeshua.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's possible. It's part of the question, but then it's a little bit out of order, which is okay. In Kilayim, this they have the same structure as the long red bars here. Kirid bars. In Kilayim, you have the same, so you're a little bit structured in a different order slightly. So yeah, we're going either that's part of the answer. It's like a rhetorical question, just to expand the answer a little bit more, or that really should have been a little bit earlier in the sugya. That question of might know Yeshua. But it be that as it may, Lamaisa, the conclusion is Yeshua was not making a condition for Ov Aveira who want to retain Kilayim in their field. No, the guy wants it plucked out, but he wants it plucked and left in the field, not carted away. Okay? Now it says more, why don't we say the thing, let's say the same thing by a vineyard. That by a vineyard also you find grasses growing, so you should have to leave them there because he likes the grasses in order to tie his clusters of grapes together. Okay? In other words, just like you have, now again, he doesn't want them to remain in the ground. He wants them akurim umunachim, but to say the same thing. How come you should only said by a tilson field, that you should have that it's gezel, should say the same thing by a kerem? And Demar Rabbi Yanai said, Kol asvichin asurin. All grasses which grow are forbidden. Now, forbidden here, the question is what exactly they're forbidden for. There's the Pnei Moshe explains that they're forbidden because of theft, which would be a vast expansion of Yeshua's principle, right? That caused Sovim Asurin. He said, cause some return except for the tilson. So if you learn the story about theft in Rabbi Yana, it's about to expand and say there are many more grasses which are also to take, right? But the way actually the Yerushalmi brings down, and the way the Chaim Kanievsky learns Kilayim, we're talking about vis-a-vis Shemitah. There's a halacha in Shemitah that Rabbanan Aser, we assume that Tzvichim is the Rabbanan. Rabbanan Aser grasses which grow wild during Shemitah in fields which are normally planted, because they had a problem in the old days. People would plant grasses and say, no, we didn't do it intentionally. It grew wild. It wasn't our fault. So therefore, they made a blanket exam that said tzvichim are aser. Except they only aser tzvichim in all cases, except for the following cases. They said, call tzvichim aser chutz ve'elam b'stei bur, except for grasses which come in a field which is intentionally left fallow that year. So everybody knows you're not going to grow grasses in a fallow field. The whole idea was to leave it fallow, right? It was staying there in a field which was plowed, right? Plowed means that it was not the plowed of same reason to leave it fallow. It wasn't plowed in order to grow. It was plowed in order to leave it fallow that year. Besides, the carom grasses which grow in a vineyard, they're not also because nobody wants to grow grasses in their vineyard, because potentially these grasses are going to be what? Kilayim, right? They're going to be kilayim with your carrot. That's obviously talking about grasses which make grain, not stam grasses. There's kilei akerem we're talking about here, right? So it's not grasses, like your bluegrass, but rather it's grasses which have grain in them. Uvesod zera, and in a field which is made for the purpose of seed, the grasses obviously deplete the seed in some way. Besod the bor, now the more explains. Besod the bor, lo mashkachale. Saw the bor, obviously we know he didn't plant. He was left to fallow that year, so therefore we're not afraid of Avera. Besod you're in a plowed field, left plowed. To boy metakta chakli, he wants to fix it by having nothing grow there this year, so it's counterproductive to him. Beside the kerem, he doesn't want it to grow. Shlo less or karma, not to make kilei kerem. Beside the zera in a seed field, shader relates to him. He doesn't want them because they diminish the capacity to produce seed. Now, here the going gets a bit iffy. Yeah, it's here it says being talking about the Gilin Ephraim changes Vata Marta. Those are people who change it differently. But let's learn like Gilin Ephraim. Vata Marta Roitze Bohem Kilu Akur Nemunachi Lefonov. Let's say that vis-a-vis Shemitah and vis-a-vis theft, which would be the same thing. Let's say, why doesn't a guy want Svichim to grow in his vineyard? Let him want it. It's an issue of Kilayim. It's not a problem, Kilayim. We'll say, like we said by the fenugreek field, he wants them to grow, but he wants people to pluck them out, right? And this, therefore, it should be also vis-a-vis Svichim by Shemitah, because maybe he's going to do an underhanded thing and grow them. And on the other hand, it should be mutter, it should be also by vis-a-vis Gezel as well. Nobody should be allowed to take them. Yeah, we know that the only thing Yeshua answered was grass which grows in the fenugreek field. How come? What's to treat that qualitatively and a kerem? So says the Gemara, Vata Marta Roitze B'hem Kilu Akur Munachi Lefanam. Right? I think I read that already, but I'm reading it again because I didn't read the way I want to. The way I want to really learn is like this: the Gilin Ephraim and the Gilin Ephraim and most of them before the Shai Teres Yisrael learned that there's no answer here, that it's a kasha, right? Let's say the same eitzah which we said before, that it should be that by kerem, just so it should be to say this tilson, it should be also to take, but it shouldn't be a problem of kilayim because you wanted to yakurim umunachim. But I want to learn that this is actually an answer. The way I want to learn is that this is different. By kilai, by kerem, it's different than by a fenugreek field. Because by a fenugreek field, what's the worst thing which can happen? They're going to grow, and you're going to transgress this of kilayim, right? That's bad, but it's not also bad, no, right? Tilson, which grows together with grasses, is kilei zroim, not kilei kerem. But by a kerem, if it grows together and there's any chashash that you wanted it to be that way, so then it's much worse because kilei kerem is also bano, right? Any kilei zroim is not also bano, but kilei kerem is. So I think I want to learn like this. I'm not sure I'm right. Probably I'm wrong because nobody else learns this way, but. I think that it's a vim toimar v'ata marta. Here we're saying it's different. Right to ben kilu akru munach lefanav by kilu by just before that meant one thing, but here it means another thing. In other words, by a kerem, for sure he doesn't want them there because they're going to answer. There's a potential, a slight potential, but there's definitely potential that it's going to answer his whole thing. The whole vineyard. The vineyard's going to be still kilei kerem. So therefore, Yoshua there didn't make the same takana he made by Tilson. By Tilson, he said, leave it in the field because he wants them. He wants them not for the purpose. It might be kilayim. No, he doesn't want them to grow. He wants them to be there for the purposes of ropes. But here, by kilei kerem, Yoshua said no. Treat them like grass is growing elsewhere and take them away. Maybe the grasses are good for him to make ropes, yes, but he himself doesn't want to take a chance that maybe he's going to create a situation of Kilei HaKerem. So therefore, in this case, he wants you to take them away. It's true he might want them for the ropes, but it's better for him better for you to, as from his perspective, not take a chance of Kilei HaKerem. As I'm saying this, I like what I'm saying, but I don't see it in the Gemara. Because in order for me to say this, I have to say that when it says here, not that he wants them to be placed in front of him, it really wants them to be taken away. Yoshua would want them to be taken out even, because Yoshua was matir these to be taken, to be stolen. So I think what I'm saying is a good answer, but it's not what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying is the kasha. In other words, why can't we say by Kerem that the same you said by Tilson that it should be also because of Gesel? It's not an issue of Kilayim because he wants them really to be uprooted and used for ropes. What I'm saying is an answer, but it's not in the Gemara. That Kilayim can't, because it's more severe. He doesn't want them to be there in order to answer his vineyard. All right, be that as it may. Now, there's a line missing here, according to most of the Mefarshim here. We're going to go to the second takon of Yehoshua. Okay, the second takon of Yehoshua is umeis mitzvah kana mekoimo. A meis mitzvah acquires the spot where he's buried. Wherever he's buried, you leave him there. So now I'm going to ask the question. We learned over there. Hamoitzi meis b'tchila mushla kedarko. If you find a mace initially cast along the wayside, it buried, of course, in the ground, but cast along the wayside. Noitly, you take him, remove him as tusaso, and the dirt around him into which his rot has seeped, and you rebury him elsewhere. Rav Chisda teaches us meis mitzvah mutal l'fanaiso. Would seem to teach us that a meis mitzvah is not kana mekoimo. Rather, you can remove him any way you want. The tzina nolves tusaso just says you take him together with his the ground. The kama, how much is that? Rabbi Shmuel Cheremius said ad shlosha is both 3 finger breadths into the ground. Ad makom shamo yored, to the point where his juices, they go and get sucked into the ground. So be that as it may, it's a kasha. I can say meis mitzvah kana mekoimo. So Rabbi Zira said, now, we're on the top of Tes Zion base, but there's a whole bunch missing here, which is in the parallel sugya in Nazir. And it should say here the following. Rabbi Zira tipoter, explain, you don't have this, shenik bar shalom, let's talk about a case where he was buried without permission there. Or shenik bar l'shel, or is buried there on a borrowed basis. The Chash Lomar, all this you don't have, although we're going to have something like this later on. The Chash Lomar Shema Meis Mitzvah. Wait a minute, maybe it's a Meis Mitzvah, in which case you can't move him. So Rabbi Zera Shein Meis Mitzvah Mitzvahim. Rabbi Zera holds that Meis Mitzvah are not prevalent. In other words, if you find just a body buried, you don't assume it's a Meis Mitzvah. If it's not in a cemetery, you assume it just happened to have been buried there for convenience sake, in a time of stress or distress, and that's why I got this. So that's why you can move it. Ve'echav, it's a mitzvah, meis mitzvah mamish. Meis mitzvah kana mekomo. Okay. The ground was borrowed for this purpose. In other words, it was It was not meant to be. It was buried out tonight. It was not meant to remain there. It was only borrowed temporarily. We'll move later on, right? Lo mistarbra do ela meis mitzvah also back to the Gemara. Lo mistarbra do, it doesn't make sense to say that this story about a meis mitzvah. Ela meis mitzvah also fanaiso. A meis mitzvah not allowed to move. Shima ta oimer oimer at muta lifanoso. Now the Gemara connects both takonis to Yeshua. If you're going to say that a meis mitzvah, you can move, right? Now, this is an alternate answer. In other words, we said meis mitzvah kana mekoimo, and it says more must be meis mitzvah kana mekoimo. Because why is that? Because shima ta'ir muta v'nos, you say you can move a meis mitzvah. Then elu The grasses in the vineyard, which cause the loss of the entire field, you certainly would be able to move it, and he wouldn't need a Tanai of Yoshua. Yoshua made a condition that because of fasting Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says, look, Yoshua makes mitzvah kana mekaymo. Because if makes mitzvah lo kana mekaymo, right, and that you're allowed to move a mace mitzvah, so then for sure, grasses which are a vineyard, you're allowed to move. Because the mace mitzvah you're allowed to move must be because it's ruining the field. You can't use your field. Part of it is being held up by the mace mitzvah, right? So therefore, if you'd be allowed to move mace mitzvah, for sure you'd be allowed by definition to move grasses, which are potentially going to harm the field, right? Where there's no need of covered on mace, right? So if you're going to say that there's a takara Yoshua made that you're allowed to uproot grasses, that must be because there's a countervailing takara not to move mace and mitzvah. It's an amazing thing the Yerushalmi say. But if there wasn't a takara not to move mace and mitzvah, then it would be you wouldn't need Yoshua's takana that you're allowed to chop down grasses. It must be if Yoshua had to make a takana, they're allowed to chop down grasses at will from somebody else's field. That is, yes, that's okay, but mace and mitzvah are not okay. You can't move a mace mitzvah. It's an amazing comparison the Yerushalmi is making. I'm not responsible for this. But again, the Yerushalmi is saying it must be a mace mitzvah also to move. Because otherwise, you wouldn't need Yoshua to make a takana that you're allowed to move the grasses. Right? If the Yoshua had to make such a takana, must be he was explained to, may say mitzvah, they got to remove and remain, even though they inhibit your use of the field. But the grasses you're allowed to move for your friend's field because it causes the loss because of potential loss of what's the word I'm looking for, kilayim. So it's a little bit of a mess, let's read inside again. So according to it's possible that here, actually the Gemara is answering the Kerem issue. And saying that why Yoshua allowed you moving from a Kerem. It's possible just going generally on the grasses when you're allowed to move the grasses. But that's what he says here. Again, lo mistabra do ela meis mitzvah also fanoso. It's clear that meis mitzvah must be also to move. Sheimayim mutzah fanoso, if you say it was mutter to move him, elu, then the grasses, all ma'avin kol sadeh, which cause a loss of the entire field. Actually, no, it's the opposite of what I said a moment ago. A meis mitzvah would be a kal v'chomer. If meis mitzvah only causes the loss of a corner of a field, you're allowed to move. Certainly the grasses, which cause the loss of the entire field because of kilayim, you'd be allowed to move. In other words, remove them from your friend's field. So why would Yoshua need a separate takana on the grasses that you're allowed to? Kal v'chomer, meis mitzvah, it's only a corner, you could certainly move the grasses, which are entire field. So it must be that meis mitzvah is taka, also to move. And that's why Yeshua had to say, but the grasses, which are potentially a greater problem, that you're allowed to move. So actually now the Gemara is going back and saying an interesting thing. The Gemara is saying, you know why grasses you're allowed to remove in your friend's field? It's not because of some favor Yoshua did to passers-by that they can take grasses. No, in essence, the passers-by are doing a favor to the balabas, because they're saving his field from becoming kilayim. The only kilayim which really answers is kilei kerem. Kilei rom don't answer, right? It's still mutar b'no. Nevertheless, we want to make sure he remains a tzaddik. He doesn't transgress the aveir of kilayim. So therefore, we police his fields and remove kilayim whenever we see them growing. Okay? Says the Gemara, Mimad Pshitotana Meis Mitzvah Fanoso, since it's partial to the Tana that a Meis Mitzvah is not allowed to move, Lefum Kain, therefore Tzarech, it should be Masnei. Lieberman changes. That's why Yoshua had to make a Tanai that yes, the Meis Mitzvah you cannot move, but the grasses you can remove from your friend's field. Rav Chisda said, Asyo, this is Goyla Kimandamar, it's basically repeating what I said we should be introduced into Reb Zera. Rav Chisda asked Kimandamar, it's Goyla to people which hold Meitz Mitzvah, it should be Aser Lefanoso. And the Meitz Mitzvah is forbidden to move. Lieberman makes that change. The Shai so just takes out the whole Rav Chisda business here altogether. So it's not in Nazir, why should it be here? But Lieberman says, if it is here, it should say, it says, Goy like Mandaras holds Meitz Mitzvah Aser Lefanoso. Why is that? Ani Omer, why can you move this one, which is mentioned on Medalef in the Brisa? Because Ani Omer, it should be either B'She'ela, like I said from the quote from Nazir, and that's the way the Escorial manuscript adds it. B'She'ela Nikbar, there's borrowed only on a borrowed, but buried only on a borrowed basis, and that's to move him. Or what Lieberman proposes, instead of Shvili Rishus, it'd be Beli Rishus. He was buried there, so that's why the Meis and Amrav you're allowed to move. How do you know? Maybe it's Taka Meis Mitzvah. Meis Mitzvah Mitzuya. No, Meis Mitzvah not prevalent. Now, the next word we're telling seems to be going on the previous line. But all the Achronim change it. They say it should be Umetailen. And this is a new Takon of Yehoshua. It's Metailen B'Shvili HaRishus. You can walk in the pathways, optional pathways, which go through your friend's field. We should talk from the time the greatest harvest of the year before, until the second rain falls. In other words, there's no growth in the field during that time. The stuff only starts sprouting out of the ground after the second rain in the winter. So the whole summer you can walk through ad hoc paths, Shvili HaRishus, through your friend's field. So the word Shvili Rishus in the previous line is an unfortunate error because the Shvili Rishus over here. That's when the previous line should really be B'She'ela Nikbar, as I said, or B'li Rishus Nikbar. But here it's about Shvili Rishus, optional pathways. Okay? Says the Gemara, another talk going to be Yeshua is that you can take saplings wherever they grow. Chutz misho zayis or shogef. In other words, you can take saplings and use them in your field. I guess it's talking about hefsker saplings. You can take them and move them to your field wherever they grow. Chutz misho zayis shogef, except for olive saplings and grape saplings, you must leave them in place. Bezayis, however, that's not always true. Bezayis, by an olive sapling, mina chodesh shebechod. No. This is just one of the takonos of Yehoshua. Here you're pruning the entire sapling, not jumping down. Yeah. So besides mina chodesh shebechodesh, you could take also the newest of the new, which is not yet growing fruit. Mina yashin shebiyashin, and the oldest of the old, which is already not growing fruit anymore. But not anything in the middle. Anything in the middle you can't take, because if it's growing fruit and you uproot it, I guess you diminish its capacity to be eaten. Maybe it gets orla again, or somehow the strength is going to be sapped. You only take either very, very new or very, very old. If it was growing like in a triangle shape, don't ask me why. You can't even take the newest of new, which hasn't grown any fruit yet. I guess it's a very powerful olive tree. It's growing this triangle shape. I think it means there are three trunks coming out of the same root, and therefore to move it would be very devastating. And then even if it's brand new and it's not yet growing any olives, you still can move it. I'm not sure if that's what it means, but it means something to that effect. Anyway, those are the four takonos which we enumerated till now. The one about removing grasses from your friend's field, and we came to the conclusion that Zor prevent kilayim, Meis mitzvah kana makomo, right? You can't move him. You can walk in Shvili HaRishus until the stuff starts sprouting, and you can take saplings, young fruit tree saplings, wherever they're growing. Okay, that's one version of the four. Rabbi Tanchon Kvar Nun or Gun B'Shem Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yossi said Arba the following four. different version. You can gather grasses wherever. But you can't remove the roots. Now, from here it sounds like it's not a kilayim issue, but rather, grasses, whatever you need grass, you can go to your friend's field and take them, right? Because they're easily replenishable, as long as you don't uproot the roots. So it's clearly not a kilayim issue, because kilayim issue want to take the roots up too, right? But here it's talking about just in order to, as a replenishable resource, you can make use of your friend's grasses. And you can defecate behind your friend's fence, in other words, in his field, even though it's damaging to his field. But as Rabbi Tana, who said, you can go into your friend's field till the point that when you defecate and you pass gas, right, bisatesh is coughing, but here it means coughing from the bottom, that they won't hear you from the road. So you can go all the way to your friend's field, that far away from the road, in order to defecate when you're obviously in a pinch. Also, that you can graze animals, even sheep, in forests. Now, forest land was owned by people. That's what it says. It's not owned by specific individuals, but it's owned by the shevet. But I can go to another shevet's area and graze my animals there, because the forests are considered to be vis-a-vis this halacha as if they're hefker. Okay? The nice Naftali, and it's interesting, the final tonight is very interesting. The nice Naftali, Molei Chevel Dromel Shayam. Naftali has to get a rope's length of the seashore on the south side of the Kinneret. He's got to get that. Wherever you get beyond that, to another shevet, the beach has to go to Naftali. Why is that? Because it says Yom on the west, Vidarom, and on the south, Yerusha, Naftali will inherit. Basically. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you don't have to give them on the seashore. It says you have to give them on two different seas. Yom se Yam Shel Samchu, I believe that's the Chula, which has been drained. But that they restored it a little bit recently. But that's the northern lake. The Durham's the Yam Shel Tveria, because they have to get part of the Chula and part of the Kinneret. Mistaken and starting. Now, mistaken and starting means it's either going back on the bathroom halacha, where you defecate, or it's going to the Gemara Brachos. The Gemara Brachos says if the road, they didn't have crews like Chicago fixing the road 24 hours a day like they do here. So they're in the middle of the winter. They had the Yerushalmi Bava Basra Yisedos drachim. It's hard to walk on the road because they were like ruts going up and down, kind of like the alleys in Chicago. Now you guys live in Skokie, you don't know about this, but it was difficult to walk in the middle of the road. So therefore, then you're allowed to go on the side of the road, even somebody else's field. Rishim Rab said, "Afilu sadem molea karko," even if his field is full of saffron, which is a very expensive flower, you're still allowed to walk there and tread on his growth. Says Maramad, "Molo." Do you pay for the saffron which you trampled or not? Right? Mimad Rabida afilu molea karko, but that for language which Rabida said, even if it's full of karkom, hada, it should be hada amara. Eino nosin dami. The Escorial says you don't pay, because if he says even saffron, it means that you don't even have to pay, even though it's saffron. So he actually changes the gears, so the Escorial manuscript says Eino nosin dami. Rabbi Law said, and the Escorial says Rabbi Law said b'shem masnisa in the name of Bryson. And Rabbi Yehuda said b'shem Shmuel, so a lot more than it says over here. Now he came in the Maravidah, brother. Rabbi Yehuda Amrei Lo b'shem Masdi, son Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Shmuel. Afilu Sodim Leah Karkom. Let's confirm what we just said. Came and walk in the saffron filled field. Hadamra teaches a noisim domim that you don't pay. Okay. Now it says where ve'eda yochel chok. Now this is the Escorial is a much better gear. So here it says. About the walking in the middle of the road. What if it's through dochak? He can hold back until he can defecate somewhere else. or through dochak, he can walk in the middle of the road until he can get somewhere else. Is he required nevertheless, is he allowed nevertheless to go through the saffron fields? So Shmini Me'adot, let's learn out from here. It was a way, there was a time when Gamliel walking down the road, and the Escorial adds, but you mistalkim, they say it's a drachim, they went to the side because of the ruts in the middle of the road. V'ros Yehuda ben Papus, and they saw Yehuda ben Papus mishtakea, he was sinking in, because the roads had such great ruts, he went down and up and down and up, right? V'ros Yehuda ben Papus mishtakea, but connect, that's sinking and coming opposite that. Who's this guy who's putting the finger on himself? Meaning being a Baal Gaiva. He said, Yehuda ben Papus, no, it's Yehuda ben Papus, should call Ma'aseh Shem Shamayim, everything he does is Shem Shamayim. Can't criticize him. Whatever he does, Shem Shamayim. So be that as it may, what we see from here is that even though it's possible to be doichik oneself like Yehuda ben Papus did, you're not mechuyev to do so. So Yerushalmi and Gamliel were walking on the side in other people's field because they say it was drachim. Okay? That was another first Takos Yeshua. Now we get to another interesting halacha, and that's not the Bavli. Yerushalmi said, you want to build a city. You're a city planner. You decide we're going to build a new city. So you give him, I know who's giving it to him, but you give him 4 roads on the 4 sides of to the 4 directions. You give him 4 highways, north, south, east, west. Okay? What's the width of the roads you give him? It's obviously not less than 4 amos, but is it between 4 and 8 amos, or mishmona ad sheshes? I don't know. I guess so. Makes sense, right? He's purchasing property, so now you give him you have to forward him 4 roads. I guess that's the pshat. It makes sense. You're telling somebody stop from the shaved ears, so you have to give him this possibility of 4 roads. It makes sense in the line of our mission. Very good. Okay, is it 4 to 8 or 8 to 16? From 8 to 16 amos. 16, of course, the maximum shiur v'shus harabim. They should korn hole of a korn bus so that wagons could pass each other. 8 amos is the minimum shiur for 2 wagons to pass each other, because wagons are 4 amos wide, right? So it has to be at least 8 amos you give him, but no more than 16 amos, right? Because 16 amos is the maximum shiur for v'shus harabim. How long a base? How kodesh day lot is b'dol shachaver if you buy 2 trees in your friend's yard. I raised low konakak, you didn't buy land. Okay? So therefore, you have the trees until they die. Once they die, you get out of there, right? Or until you chop them down. And the Mayor Kanakakar, Mayor disagrees, says even 2 trees you bought land, and therefore you can replant them once you cut them down or once they die. Higdilu, if you don't have land, lo yishafef, they grow, when they grow large, the owner of the land has no right to cut the foliage, even if it's obscuring his land, because that was the whole point of his selling just a tree, that the tree has the right to grow, even though it's impinging on his land, since by definition it's all his land, so therefore he has to allow it to grow freely. What's growing out of the trunk belongs to the person who bought the tree. The shranch grows out of the roots, since the land belongs to Baal Bas, belongs to Baal Bais. The mason, if the 1 or 2 trees die, and Lokarka, he has no land to replant. If he bought 3 trees, Kanakarka, then he bought land. And then, on the contrary, if they grow, the foliage grows too large and extends over the owner of the land's field, then the owner of the field is allowed to trim them. Because then already he says, look, whatever land I gave you with the trees, that's your land. You can't encroach upon my land. Right? In that case, that whatever grows in the roots also belongs to the person who bought the trees, because he has rights in the land. The mason, if they die, Yeshul is the right to replant. The Beit Rabbi said, what's called coming out of the roots? Haroas Hatzel, that which sprouts out of the shadow, meaning out of the ground. Zeh Shoresh. In other words, an exposed root is not considered to be in a root. A root is considered what's in the ground. So Chiddush, it's not in Bavli. Haroas Achama, so that which sees the sun, with exposed roots, Zegez is considered to be trunk. So if it grows out of the ground, out of the root in the ground belongs to the owner of the field. It grows out of an exposed root that's standing out of the ground of the trunk, and that belongs to the owner of the tree. Okay? Rabbi Chama Bar Baruch Hashem Yossi said, "Holy mishrash of umigizo." What if it's growing out of both the roots and the trunk? Zeu shorish. As if it's growing from the root and belongs to the owner of the field. Bihiza mishlo mishrashav. Only if it grows out of the trunk by itself and not out of the roots. Zeu ilan, it's a tree. I'm not sure if he's arguing or complimenting. In other words, is he defining trunk the traditional way? Is he also defining trunk the light, anything which is above ground? It's not clear. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Hakodesh shloshim lanos." If you bought three trees, you buy the land between the 3 trees, utachtein, and under the trees, and around the trees, kamoli aor v'salo, the amount of which somebody who's plucked, the amount of distance takes for somebody who's harvesting to walk around with this basket. Amar says, "V'derech elo." He doesn't have a road access to the trees. He's got to hire a path, rent a path to get to his trees. But he does have, again, this area to walk around and harvest. So the way the Pnei Moshe learns, it's bitmiyah. You're really going to say such a thing? I'm not sure if it's bitmiyah. I think it's actually a fact. I think he has no path. He has to rent the right to get to his trees, but he does have the right to harvest them, so therefore he has land around them to walk around and harvest his trees. Okay. Somebody who sells a head of a cow or any other behema gasa, large animal. Moros are glad he doesn't automatically sell the legs with it. Moros if you sell the legs, or Moros you don't automatically sell the head. Moros if you sell the trachea, local Moros you don't automatically sell the liver. Moros if you sell the liver, lo Moros you don't automatically sell the kone. Al behema daka by a sheep. Moros harosh if you sell the head, Moros includes the legs. Moros if you sell the legs, lo Moros harosh doesn't include the head. In other words, the head includes the legs. Legs is from the knees down, right? But not vice versa. Mochas a if you sell the kone, that includes all the trachea, that includes the liver. But it's going to sell the liver, Lamar's kone doesn't necessarily include the trachea. Okay, these are all the conditions in the marketplace in the old days, right? But it's not the question why, that's just the way things work. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak asked an interesting question. Everybody has difficulty with this question. I'm not sure why. Very straightforward. Yitzchak asked, Mocher Chatzi Arosh. This is a question you'd expect Rabbi Yirmiyah to ask, but Rabbi Yitzchak, whoever he was, asked it. You sold half a head, right, by a sheep. Mocher Chatzi Raglaim, did you sell half the legs? Or Mocher Chatzi Kona. Mocher Chatzi Kona, did you sell half the liver, right? So Mocher Chatzi Kona is a fragment. The best thing, the easiest thing to do is take it out. Let's take it out. Who takes out the Lieberman brings out from the Radbaz, not the Ritbaz, the Radbaz, so he doesn't have it. The Shmini Me'adon. Let's learn out from here. Now, there's a big machlokas as to what the conclusion of this Gemara will be. Some that learn the conclusion of Gemara will be that it does work. Some will learn the conclusion of Gemara is that it doesn't work. The Radbaz, again, who was one of the Chosh V'Achronim, learns the conclusion is that it doesn't work. So we're going to learn like the Achronim will learn like him, as opposed to the Gilin Ephraim say in the Pnei Moshe, who learned that you do sell half, when you sell half the head, you sell half the legs. We'll learn like the Radbaz, which is, we're going to learn the proof in that fashion. Nishmei me'adam, what if a butcher sold you the hand of the foreleg of an animal, a rosh kamoshu, or the head as is, or the intestines kamoshe. So no coin, you give the coin each corresponding part. What does the coin get from the hand? The zroa, right? What does he get from the head? The l'chayim, right? What does he get from the intestines? The keva. So the butcher gives that to the kohen. He doesn't take off from the price because it's understood that's part of the purchase, right? In other words, that will be deducted from the purchase price because you sell by unit, right? Now, what happens if he sells b'mishkol?
Unit, not by pounds.
Right, head by head, which means minus the l'chayim, which is going to go to the kohen, right? However, lachem b'mishkol, if you buy by weight, no the kohen, then the butcher gives the kohen. But not going to dummy, but has to take off from the purchase price because it's not selling by unit but by weight. So the proof from this with Ribas and the Bechamayim, Liebman learn, is very simple. When you sell half a head, there's no such. It's not a unit. What is it? You're selling by weight, right? So just like, but when you sell by weight, you don't take the Zerol Chaim and Keva must be deducted, right? Because you're selling by precision, not by unit. So therefore, you don't sell you don't sell anything other than the thing that you're selling. And so Chatzi Rosh, it doesn't include Chatzi Raglayim. When you sell by units, then head includes by sheep legs, right? And trachea includes liver. But if you sell halves, then by definition you're already selling by weight. By weight, it's only precisely what you sold, no more, no less. And that's why it does include the Chatzi Raglayim and the Chatzi HaKavod. Okay, Arba Midas B'moichin. Did you do Marv yet? Okay, good. Arba, we don't do Marv this year, in this year. Next week, actually, in a problem, right? Because earlier minyanim don't exist that much anymore. But, all right, Arba Midas B'moichin. If he, there are 4 midos by sellers. Machlochitim yafos v'nim tzuros. If you sold sold what's supposed to be good grain and turned out to be bad grain. Okay, the buyer can renege. Rose said it was supposed to be bad grain and found it was actually good grain. The seller can renege. Rose v'nim tzuros. The fowls, they were bad, supposed to be bad, and they would turn out to be bad. The office is supposed to be good, and they turn out to be good. Nobody can renege. Shchimt is same thing, dark and light. Shchimt is same as Levada. Levada needs a shchimtis. Same idea. Same idea. Eitzim shel zayis to shikma. He was supposed to sell olives, sold sycamore. Shikma needs to shel zayis. Same idea. Yaim needs to chayim. Same idea. Wine and vinegar. Chayim needs to yaim. In that case, both can renege, right?
Both meaning
buyer and seller.
So even person who made
right, they're different. They're not deficient. Right, they're different, not deficient. So therefore, since they're different, it's saying like where the both can renege on the deal. Okay, in other words, it's not like gross and yaffles. It's different types. So therefore, each person can renege. I should have made that clear. So he sells his friend Peros. Moshach v'lo modan. The buyer pulled it, but it wasn't yet measured. So we don't know how much it was there. Kana. It's considered to be a kinyan. Moda v'lo moshach, but measuring and without doing mashicha is not considered to be a kinyan. Unless, if the buyer was smart, sochas mekomo, then the place where the measuring vessel is, he rents it out, because then what he's kind of everything has supported to the vessel, not by Mashicha, not by Medida, but by what? By Kinyan Kotzer, right? Because once he rent out the place, he acquires it through Kinyan Kotzer. Okay? Somebody buys flax from his friend. I raise a little kana actually taflan mokum. So Kinyan until he does Mashiach on it. We have a chuber karka, but if the flax is still growing in the ground, the tolash koshu, and he plucked out some part of it, kana he acquired meat, but through that it's like a kinyan on a field. He acquired whatever flax is growing in the field. So he sells wine and oil to his friend. Vukra, and they went up in price, or Shuzah went down in price. If it's before the measure was filled, then lamocher. Then it's the buyer's advantage or disadvantage. Which is Mali Samita, if it's after measure is filled, La Lokech, then it's to the Lokech's advantage or disadvantage. And Mar's going to ask, how does that work? What does measuring out have to do with anything? Where's the kinyan? Mar's going to ask that. Sarsu B'neim. if there's a agent between the two of them, and nishbra chavis. Now here the Tosefta says Rabbi Huda and nishbra chavis. That's going to be critical. Lieberman points out when you get to the Gemara. He says if the barrel breaks, nishbra sarsu, it's the sarsu's problem. In other words, he's a shomer. He's a shomer socher. So therefore he's chayev on aveda. So therefore he's got to reimburse whoever loses as a result. Okay? When you're pouring out to somebody, you have to pour the last till three droplets come out. You have to keep pouring until drop. Then that's considered to be fully poured. Here, kino umitzes, when after the 3 drops came out, you stood it up again, right? Even though there's still stuff in there, raise a shemoicher. That point, the loker is misyoish for getting any more. Whatever's left in the barrel belongs to the seller. Chenvani, now here, Lieberman takes out Eno, based on the Leiden manuscript, where the word Eno is not there, and that makes the Gemara much more palatable. Chenvani chayav latif lo shlosha tipin. A chenvani has to do the same thing. A storekeeper must drop the 3 drips at the end. It says if it's Friday night, right before Chashecha, Friday evening, and he's running home before Shabbos, he doesn't have to wait that long when pouring. Okay? It's just stop pouring before that. V'hechi says, well, what's it talking about? Well, we said before, if the price goes up and down as you're pouring. If it's before it's poured, it's the moichers. If it's after it's poured, it's the loker's issue. How so? Where does pouring ever make a kinning? Says more, if the meter belongs to the moicher, chazok l'moicher. So it's still the moicher. It's going up and down in his domain. If it's the lokerch, the chazok l'lokerch goes up and down in his domain, right? B'shem Shmuel, Rabbi Law, b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yusuf and Shmuel and Rabbi Law said, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Berebi, Kini Masisa Mishtabar. Shai Samida Law the Macher. The Mida belongs to a third party. Now, when it belongs to a third party, that means as this person is makne this Mida to each person as he needs it. So before it's filled up, who does the Mida belong to? Who does the third party makne to the Moicher? After the Midah is filled up, who's he makna to? Lokeach, right? So therefore, as the Midah is being poured, it belongs to the Moicher. As the Midah is filled, it belongs to Lokeach. Because of the das of the third party's makna, it in turn to the Moicher as it's being filled up, and to Lokeach after it's filled up. So actually, this is obviously talking about also in his domain, because obviously Caleb Shalokech B'Shul's Moicher Lokara. So it's obviously talking about a case where this third party, the sarsur, is in turn being makna his yard and his midah to first the Moicher and then Lokech. So before it's filled up, whatever loss or gain there is in the price belongs to the Moicher. After it's filled up, whatever loss or gain there is in the price belongs to the Lokech. Okay? Says the Gemara, Tani, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Leila Shabbos Chashecha Potter. Friday night before nightfall, he's exempt from pouring the 3 drops. Why is that? Mipnei shehu reshus. Because I skipped. No, I didn't skip. I'm sorry. Tani Rabbi Yehuda Omer Leila Shabbos Chashecha Potter. Mipnei shehu reshus. Le Shabbos Chashecha. The Friday night Chashecha. Why is he potter? Why? Because he has reshus. Now, Bav used language Torah. What it means is that he has reshus to run home for Shabbos. He's Torah in the theater of the mitzvah of Shabbos. So therefore, he doesn't have to pour the 3 drops. If you're selling, no matter what, you're chayav. You're liable to pour 3 drops. You got to pour those 3 drops. Okay. My timer. Now, this is going back to Rabbi Yehuda who said if the barrel breaks, it's the sarsu's problem. Why is that? Rabbi Yehuda says, in other words, Rabbi Yehuda, who authored the statement in the Tosefta, is the same one who says, Im Sachir Babischara. It says if you're a renter, then you're like a Shomer Sachar. So therefore, if you're a hired watchman, so because you're a hired watchman, you're getting paid, so therefore you're liable for Aveda. So to the Sarsar is a hired watchman, he's liable for Aveda. The fact about broke, unless it's an onus, he has to make restitution. Okay, let's try and go to the end of the parak. Should take another 5 minutes. I send my son to a storekeeper. And the storekeeper measures out for him for an isser worth of oil. But Naslos isser, and he gives him change of an isser. Shavasos, if the kid breaks the jug, I didn't send my kid to be the messenger, that he should bring back the oil and the change. I sent him to let the Chenvani know that I want oil and I want change. But the Chenvani is liable for having sent back the stuff irresponsibly with my son. You should have sent it with a responsible messenger. Rabbi Yehuda Plater says, no, it's Potter Sham, Menaskin Shilchum. He sent the kid in order the kid should be the messenger. That when the father sends the kid holding the jug, the Chenvani pours into the jug, the Chenvani is exempt. A wholesaler cleans out his measures every 30 days. Ba'abayis once every 12 months. His measures don't accumulate as much cook because he doesn't use them as often, so only every 12 months. On the contrary, the seatone, there's less cook because he's constantly turning over. The Ba'abayis is more cook, so we have to do the seatone once every 12 months and the Ba'abayis every 30 days. The storekeeper cleans out his measures Pamayim b'Shabbos twice a week. And he checks out his weight Pamachas b'Shabbos once a week. And he wipes out the scales after each and every weight. Or Shigamlir says Bamed Vorim when it's a Trubalach because stuff adheres. But not by drawing. Stuff doesn't adhere. Now he has to have the scale has to tip to the buyer's advantage by tefach, which of course is a large amount. So obviously about a very large weight, and the one is going to make that point clear. It's got to tip like this to the buyer, like this, right? So oya shokolo ayin bayin. If he does weigh precisely, nosin lo girumim, then you got to give that advantage. In other words, if you scale exactly, you still got to give advantage to lokech. You give it to him on the side. Echel asar balach 1/10 by dry liquid measures. Ve'echel be'esrim 1/20 by yavish, by dry measures. Makom shnem nagulamu where they use small measures. Limagasa shouldn't use large measures. Begasa use large measures. Limadaka shouldn't use small measures. Limchol place where they make exact measures, like a scant teaspoon. Leigdosh you can't make a heaping teaspoon. Leigdosh they make a heaping. Leigdosh can't make scant. Amar Rabbi Bobar Mel says Basiris Kayev Lachilo Tefach. Saying in the Mishnah said at the end, Girumim are 1/10, right? The additional amount which you give the buyer. So they say, when does it go Tefach down? When you're measuring in units of 10, so Tefach is a 10th extra, like 10% over. But not if it's less than that. Obviously, you don't have to give, when you measure small amounts, you don't give them a Tefach balance. That would be ridiculous. You'd make no profit whatsoever. Okay? See, now it says Moznei Tzedek, Avnei Tzedek. It says just scales and just stones. Now, but the thing is, it goes on. Okay, Moshe brings down and says, to Moznei Tzedek, Avnei Tzedek, Eifat Tzedek, a measure, all these things just, Vehein Tzedek, Yelochem. What does it mean, Yelochem? Means if you do this, you're going to have riches. So from this we learn, anytime the Torah promises reward to the person who fulfills a mitzvah. Ain't based in mitzvah musar maleh. Based is not required to compel this. In other words, based in is not required to compel this issue. Now, what do you mean? Of course, Beis Din is required to compel weights and measures, right? No, but here's Hein Tzedek. Hein Tzedek is our mission, which is talking about birutzim, where you give extra. Beis Din doesn't compel that you have to give the extra amount. You see that? Our what mocher, right? The extra tefach, the extra 1/10, which Beis Din does compel that. If you want to give that and be a pious person, that's yelochem. But Beis Din is not required to do that. Okay? Says the Gemara, says the Gemara, Yelucha. Wait a minute. It says it should be to you, Menelecha. It's an agronomist. It says you should appoint, the Department of Agriculture is in charge of weights and measure, even on your gasoline. Did you ever notice that? The seals on the gasoline, that the measures are accurate, are from the Department of Agriculture. That it was because it says the agronomist was the person who's in charge of weights and measures. So he's still in the Department of Agriculture. Go next time you go to a gas station, look at the gas pump. Okay, so agronomist says you have to have people in charge. How can you say Beis Din doesn't have to be involved? Means. Of course, Beis Din be involved. It means any mitzvah where the reward is promised. Beis Din is not punished if they don't do it. They should be involved, but they're not required. They don't get punished if they don't. There's another version here. The Skori out says Beis Din Ochnala. Beis Din should have somebody involved and in charge, but they can't punish people if they're giving the right measure for not giving the additional measure on top of that.
Who's in punishment? Would it be a punishment of Malchus?
Malchus, right. They can't get Malchus on the Tzidkus, right. They can't do that. Okay? Now, here we end up with a story. The story is very unclear. So I'm going to make a combination of me, Lieberman, and the Gilead Ephraim in order to explain it. Gilead Ephraim? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to give you my explanation. Rav, Mani Resh Galusa agronomist. Rav was appointed by the Resh Galusa to be the agronomist. He was in charge. Vave Mache, he would beat people al mechelosa on actual measures. Va'al shiraya, take out the low. That's on my own opinion. Otherwise, the whole story doesn't work. He would beat them on the actual measure and on the additional measure. So he enforced the shiurim which were additional. Okay? That's what shiur means. The other people say shiur means the shar on how much they were charging per pound. That's not mashma that way. I don't think that's the shot. Anyway, Resh Galusa put Rav in prison. Rav Karna came in and asked to visit Rav and said, how can you do this? Resh Galusa is right. It's only for the measures themselves, not for the additional amounts. That's Hein Tzedek. It's not up to you. Amalei, no. V'atanis, we learn, agronomos lemidos assured. I am in charge and make sure it happens. I don't have enforcement powers. Ain't based on own chimaleh, but I have to go and try and persuade them to do it. So brayso, agronomos lemidos assured. Amalei, I learned in a brayso. Amalei, so Resh Galusa said to Rav Karna, Pukar Marlon, go out and tell the public me putting Rav in prison was justified. Agronomish amru l'mios v'lo l'shurim. It's only for the actual measures, not for the additional shear. Says Gemara. So Rav Karna was stuck, right? Resh Galusa wants to go out and be his public relations man, but Rav told him that's not the halacha. So he did something. Come in. I'm all finished. So Rav said, you know what? He said. Rav Karna went out and he said like this. He said, Barnash the Tana Kavsha. Barnash, one more minute. The individual who teaches us about Kavsha, who taught us about Kavsha. Kavsha means the additional midas, so the heaviness of the weights. And it says also, Bava Basra, and the Bavli says that Pezai, that Rav was in charge with Tana Midos. So he's the one who taught us Midos, and he taught us Kavsha. He taught us about the additional amounts. The Ahinu, the officers, the policemen, Remember it says Ainu or policeman. Chavshin lay, they hold him in prison. So he didn't come outright and say that Rav is correct. He didn't come outright and say like the Reish Galus is correct. He alluded to people that he taught us certain halachos and he's being held in prison, so make it clear that he was not agreeable to Rav's being in prison, that Rav was doing the right thing.